My President, Your Excellencies, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, my dear brother Lee, and other heads of diplomatic missions. I'll be quite brief. First and foremost is that a couple of things we must understand is Africa is absolutely not industrializing. Africa is deindustrializing because our share of global manufacturing has fallen precipitously compared to other parts of the world. So we have to just change that particular trajectory. That's the key thing. But for that to happen, multilateral finance institutions and private sector really have to solve fundamental problems. And I think the Prime Minister of Ethiopia talked about it, just focusing on key issues. Number one is energy. Without energy, the talk of industrialization is simply a pipe dream. And today, Africa pretty much doesn't really have energy. And that's why industrialization really hasn't happened. And so that's why at the bank, when I took over office, we said that we will put energy as the most important thing that the bank will do in Africa, working with other regional member states, African Union, Economic Commission for Africa, and others, and of course, NEPAD. We must solve that energy problem for Africa. And that's why we launched what is called the New Deal on Energy for Africa. And I must say, even though people talk about renewable energy, I'm big on renewable energy, but we need base load energy. Africa cannot develop with what it doesn't have. It must develop with what it has. We need a mix of energy, of both conventional energy and renewable energy. I also want to say that infrastructure continues to be a major challenge, because even if you industrialize, you have to export things, and also within the region. Roads, ports, rail, and so on are going to be important. So the bank, the African Development Bank, will continue to invest heavily in infrastructure. And that's why we set up what is called Africa 50 as a new delivery vehicle that will help to mobilize $10 billion around infrastructure. And my brother is there from NEPA, the great work of Peter. We can mobilize around that. We have to, as a bank, do that. I also want to say that in agriculture, obviously, we must add value to everything. Commodity prices are low. They're highly volatile. Africa is at the bottom of global value chains, and that's bad. So we're exporting jobs, we're not really doing much. And that's why at the bank, we're going to be supporting a lot more work on private sector, but asking the question, private sector for what? Private sector to drive industrialization in Africa must be our focus. Now, when it comes to the issue of domestic resource mobilization, I think that the capital, the financing is there in Africa. Today, total amount of taxes we collect is about $548 billion a year. We need only $55 billion to solve Africa's energy problem. 10% of the taxes will solve that problem. If we stop illicit capital flows out of Africa, $60 billion a year, we will solve that problem. And if as financing institutions, we all met, even the donor partners met 0.7% of their GNI going into ODA, we will generate $168 billion, and that would solve the problem. So we really know that we shouldn't be scared about the financing, because the financing is there. We just have to make sure for private sector, we reduce the risk of investment and unlocking that financing. 2 points I make before I leave is, just sit down, is the importance of partnerships. It doesn't matter how much money the bank has. The bank has to stretch its own balance sheet, and that's why the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Asia Development Bank, and IMF, we all got together when we were hosted at the Financing for Development in a conference in Addis Ababa, that we will go from billions to trillions, because by actually doing a lot more in equity investments, leveraging our balance sheet through risk-sharing instruments and so on, we can leverage a whole lot of money for what's going to be needed. On that note, I want to end by calling for an action on financing for infrastructure. It doesn't matter what we say, without money to do it, we can't really have industrialization. So I am saying that we're calling for the establishment of an Africa Industrialization Financing Facility, and the African Development Bank will work very closely with the African Union Commission under my big sister, with the Economic Commission for Africa, and with UNIDO, and to mobilize financing for this, because we need financing to really push that industrialization agenda. And you have our full commitment from the African Development Bank to helping with others to make it happen.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Akinwumi Adesina. And we will hold you to that commitment, I'm sure. And of course, you said at the beginning how energy poverty is holding Africa back. And the irony is, of course, for a continent that is so rich in natural resources, oil and gas, that should be a lamentable state of affairs.